Okay, jumping into Genesis chapter 26, another good chapter, kind of ironic chapter if you've been following along. We see some of Abraham's flaws become some of Isaac's flaws. There's a parallel there for fathers and sons and parenting, and it is inevitable. Kids can follow you in your flaws, or they can follow you in your character qualities that are good. And a lot of times the things that are not talked about and not brought into the light, kids repeat. So Abraham had already done this twice. Isaac is experiencing a similar challenge of, I have a beautiful wife and I'm surrounded by godless people. What do I do? She's my sister. So Isaac repeats the same conflict of conscience, same sin. But what we have introduced is the marvelous grace and mercy of God in this, because in two different sections in this chapter, God is expanding his covenant relationship and the promise relationship of blessing to Isaac that he's already voiced to Abraham. So in this chapter, you're going to see a couple of sections like that, one at the beginning, one in the middle, but the one at the beginning almost appears to be a test of Isaac's faith. In a famine, don't go to Egypt. Stay in the land I've promised. But in staying in the land that God has promised Abraham, Isaac is now met with the challenge of, well, but it's a different place than I've been. Like, he has to kind of relocate within this promised land that God gave Abraham. But within this, he's meeting new people, and now he's under a little bit of a bind because Rebekah is being seen by other people. Abimelech, one of the Philistine kings, sees her and is concerned. Why is Isaac saying that she's his sister? She's obviously his wife. And he rebukes Isaac, which is kind of a theme sometimes, the godless rebuking those who are supposed to be righteous. So Isaac takes heed to that and moves on a little bit. And there's a kind of a phrase in this chapter I really like, that the Philistines filled in all of the wells that Abraham had dug, but Isaac endeavors, while he's in this region, to now dig up the old wells. And this is often something that happens through cycles in our life. There are ways that God has spoken to us in the past. There are ways that we met with the Lord in the past that have kind of become stopped up and filled in. And there were times of refreshing from those wells. And it's good for us to review that. Like, are there old wells in my life that have been stopped up that I could begin examining and refreshing that and gaining refreshment from those old processes, old perspectives, old methods? And God is faithful to Isaac in this chapter to do that very thing and to present before the Philistines around him, the hand of God is with Isaac, because wherever he digs up these old wells, there's new water coming in, and there's conflict. But that water brings life, and that water brings a challenge to those Philistines who are fighting over those wells, to the point that Isaac continues to move to the next one, and eventually gets to Beersheba, where they're digging a well, and the Philistines leave them alone. And like, oh, good, finally they've left us alone. But now he's approached by these same Philistines, and they're acknowledging God's hand on Isaac's life. And they're saying, we want peace, don't affect us, don't bother us, we won't and haven't bothered you. Let's have peace among us. So Isaac is grateful for the turn of events. And that's where the name of Beersheba, that well that's dug there, it's known as the well of the oath. They've made an oath among themselves to be at peace. And the nations of the Philistines are fine to have Isaac there. Isaac is blessed by the Lord. And a very interesting 2 verses right at the end. All of these good things about Isaac and how Isaac has overcome this weird funky spot. And through the famine, God's provided for him. And he's even made friendships. And he's settled into a new place. But at the very end, Esau takes 2 wives of the Hittites, which is the opposite of what Abraham had desired for Isaac. So now Esau, their son, is taking wives of these godless nations around them. And so this is a concern, and it says, these two wives were a grief to Isaac and Rebekah. So mom and dad are grieved over the decision of their wild hunter son to take wives of these godless pagan nations. And which leads us to the next kind of section of what does Jacob do for his wife. And that's kind of the lead up and where Jacob's story begins to take over the rest of Genesis. So hopefully that's encouraging chapter 2. It's a great chapter to get familiar with.